Welcome back to the life of Joseph, from trials to triumph. Imagine facing those who once destroyed your life. What would you do? Joseph now stands at a crossroads. Will he seek revenge or choose forgiveness? But are his brothers truly remorseful? And what happens when long-buried secrets are revealed? This is the chapter of intense emotions and questions that challenge the heart.
The famine had spread its cruel hand over the land, turning fields to dust and streams to dry beds. Hunger drove people from every corner to Egypt, the only nation prepared for such a catastrophe. Among the throngs of weary travelers, a group of men arrived at the palace granaries, their faces etched with desperation. My steward approached, whispering, "There are men from Canaan seeking grain." My heart skipped a beat. Could it be? As I stepped into the hall, I saw them, my brothers. Their robes were worn, their faces lined with hardship, but there was no mistaking them. Time had weathered them, yet the memories of our youth came rushing back. The sound of their laughter, the sting of their betrayal, all of it surfaced at once. My breath caught as I watched them bow low before me, their foreheads nearly touching the stone floor. They had no idea who I was. My heart raced, torn between anger and compassion. These were the men who had sold me into slavery, who had stripped me of my father's love and cast me into years of suffering. Yet as I looked closer, I saw something I hadn't expected. The pride and arrogance of our youth were gone, replaced by humility and weariness. I struggled to maintain my composure, my voice steady as I asked, "Who are you? Where do you come from?" Judah, his voice soft yet firm, replied, "We are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more." The mention of Benjamin and myself struck a chord deep within me. Benjamin, my only full brother, still lived, and I, the one no more, stood before them as ruler of Egypt. The irony was almost too much to bear. I clenched my hands, the weight of the moment pressing on me. They didn't recognize me. How could they? I was no longer the boy they had sold, but a man molded by God's hand. Yet, I resolved to test their hearts, to see if they had truly changed. "You are spies?" I accused, my words cutting through the air like a blade. Their faces paled, fear flashing in their eyes. But this was not about revenge. It was about reconciliation, about uncovering the truth of who they had become. The encounter left me shaken, but I knew the path forward required wisdom and patience. The journey toward forgiveness had only just begun. I stood before my brothers, my heart a storm of emotions. Their faces, pale with fear, reminded me of the day they had cast me into the pit. Yet something was different now. The arrogance and superiority that once defined them seemed to have faded. Still, I needed to know if their hearts had truly changed. "You are spies," I declared, my voice cold and commanding. "You have come to see where our land is unprotected." My accusation hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Judah stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of supplication. "No, my lord," he pleaded. "We are honest men, the sons of one father. We have come only to buy food for our families." Honest men? The word stung, a bitter irony considering their betrayal years ago. "If you are honest," I said, my tone sharp, "prove it. Leave one of your brothers here as a hostage and bring your youngest brother to me. Only then will I believe your story." The command was calculated, a test not only of their truthfulness, but of their loyalty to one another. Simeon, the second eldest, was taken into custody. His face was calm, resigned, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. The others, however, were visibly shaken. As my guards led Simeon away, I watched my brothers closely. Their eyes were filled with worry, not for themselves, but for their family. It was a stark contrast to the selfishness they had shown when they sold me into slavery. I ordered the grain to be loaded into their sacks and had my stewards secretly return their silver. As they departed, their shoulders heavy with the weight of my demands, I whispered a prayer. "Lord, give me wisdom to discern their hearts. Let this test reveal their true character." The sight of them leaving stirred something deep within me, a longing for reconciliation, for the family I had lost. But I knew the journey was far from over. Trust, like healing, takes time. I resolved to wait, to watch, and to let God's plan unfold. Months would pass before their return, and in that time my resolve to uncover the truth and seek reconciliation would only grow stronger. Months passed before my brothers returned, and when they did, they brought Benjamin. My heart leaped at the sight of him. He was no longer the child I had left behind, but a young man, his features bearing the gentle strength of our mother Rachel. His presence stirred memories I had buried, of her laughter, her kindness, and the bond we had shared as her sons. I invited them all to dine at my house. The decision perplexed them. Their whispered conversations betrayed their confusion and fear. "Why has the Lord of Egypt summoned us to his home?" Reuben murmured to Judah. "Is it a trap?" Their unease was palpable, but I remained silent, observing every interaction. At the feast, I arranged the seating by age, from Reuben to Benjamin. The look of astonishment on their faces was priceless. They glanced at one another, their brows furrowed in bewilderment. As the meal progressed, I ensured Benjamin received a portion 5 times larger than the others, a subtle test to see if jealousy still lingered among them. To my surprise, there were no envious glances, no bitter mutterings. Instead, they seemed to shield Benjamin, their protectiveness genuine. My gaze lingered on Benjamin. He ate quietly, his mannerisms so familiar they tugged at my heart. Memories of our childhood flashed before me, the way he had clung to me as a boy, the laughter we had shared under the shade of the trees. I struggled to contain my emotions. The years had taken so much, yet here he was, a living reminder of the family I had once known. As the meal drew on, the weight of the moment became too much. I excused myself, retreating to another room. There, away from their eyes, I wept, tears of joy, sorrow, and longing. "Lord," I whispered, my voice trembling, "thank you for bringing my brother to me. Help me to navigate this path with wisdom and grace." Returning to the table, I composed myself, my resolve strengthening. The journey to reconciliation was not yet complete, but this moment, this reunion, was a step forward. Benjamin's presence reminded me of what was at stake, not just my own healing, but the restoration of a family broken by betrayal. Though joy filled my heart at seeing Benjamin, I knew the ultimate test of my brother's transformation was yet to come. Their reaction to the trials ahead would reveal the truth. The room was silent as my guards searched through the sacks of grain. My brothers stood in a tense line, their eyes darting nervously as the silver cup was uncovered in Benjamin's bag. Gasps filled the air, and Benjamin's face paled with shock. The accusations I hurled were sharp and deliberate. "How could you repay kindness with such treachery?" I demanded, my voice cold and unyielding. Judah stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "My lord," he said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, "take me instead. Let the boy go back to our father, for if he does not return, our father will surely die of sorrow." His words struck me like a thunderclap. This was the same Judah who had once suggested selling me into slavery. Now, he was willing to sacrifice himself for Benjamin's sake. The weight of his plea broke something inside me. I dismissed the servants and turned to face my brothers. Tears streamed down my face as I spoke. "I am Joseph," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I am your brother, the one you sold into slavery." The words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Their faces shifted from confusion to shock and then to fear. They recoiled, their guilt written plainly in their eyes. I stepped closer, my hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves," I continued. "It was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. What you meant for harm, God meant for good." My brothers stood frozen, their breaths shallow, as the weight of my words sank in. Slowly, one by one, they approached me. Reuben, the eldest, fell to his knees, his voice breaking as he murmured an apology. Judah's hands trembled as he reached for mine, his face etched with remorse. Tears filled Benjamin's eyes as he embraced me tightly, his arms a reminder of the bond we had never truly lost. The years of pain and betrayal melted away in that moment, replaced by a flood of forgiveness and reconciliation. The room seemed to brighten as laughter and tears mingled. My brothers embraced me, their voices filled with relief and joy. The wounds of the past, though deep, were healing. I whispered a prayer of gratitude, my heart full. "Lord, you have restored what was broken. Thank you for your mercy and grace." The family I thought I had lost forever was being made whole again. But the journey was not yet over. There was still one more reunion to come. The day my father arrived in Egypt was one I will never forget. The horizon shimmered with heat as the caravan approached, its wagons laden with my family and all they possessed. My heart raced as I stood at the gates of the city, watching the figures grow clearer with each passing moment. And then I saw him, Jacob, my father, the man I had thought I would never see again. As the caravan came to a halt, I ran to him, the years of separation dissolving with every step. Jacob's frail frame trembled as he descended from the wagon, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. "Joseph," he whispered, his voice breaking. I fell to my knees before him, tears streaming down my face. He pulled me into his arms, his embrace as familiar and comforting as it had been in my childhood. "Now I can die in peace," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I have seen that my son is alive." The years had etched themselves deeply into his face. His hair was white, his hands gnarled from age and toil, but his spirit shone brightly. As we stood together, surrounded by the bustling city, I felt the weight of everything we had endured. The pain of betrayal, the years of longing, the uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment of reunion. My brothers stood nearby, their expressions a mix of relief and awe. They had brought our father here, fulfilling the promise they had made. For the first time in years, I saw unity among us, a family once fractured now beginning to heal. Pharaoh's generosity was evident in the wagons he had sent, the land he had offered for my family to settle. "The best of Egypt is yours," he had declared, and I knew it was not just my position that had secured this, but God's providence. As my family unloaded their belongings, I led my father through the streets, showing him the life I had built. "This is where God has placed me," I said softly, my voice filled with both pride and gratitude. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land, we gathered as a family. Laughter and tears mingled as stories were shared and bonds were mended. For the first time in decades, we were together, and the promise of a new beginning filled the air. Though our family was reunited, the journey of forgiveness and restoration continued, with God's hand guiding us every step of the way. The journey of forgiveness is never easy. It demands that we confront the wounds of the past, the betrayals that cut the deepest, and the pain we've carried for far too long. But in Joseph's story, we see a truth that transcends time. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the hurt. It's about choosing to let God heal what is broken. Have you ever struggled to forgive someone? Have you felt the weight of bitterness, the chains of resentment holding you back from peace? Joseph could have let his pain define him. He could have sought revenge and demanded retribution for the years stolen from him. But instead, he chose grace. He chose to trust in God's plan, even when it was unclear. As stated in Ephesians 4, verse 32, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." Forgiveness is not about excusing the wrongs done to us, but about releasing the burden they place on our hearts. It is about stepping into the freedom that God offers through His grace. Who do you need to forgive today? What relationships need healing in your life? Take the first step. Trust that as you release the pain, God will work in ways you cannot yet see, turning ashes into beauty and brokenness into restoration.
In this chapter, we witness Joseph's reunion with his brothers and his choice to forgive. What could have been an opportunity for revenge became a moment of healing and reconciliation, reminding us of the power of grace. Have you ever struggled with forgiveness? How can letting go of anger open the door to healing? Joseph's story shows us that forgiveness is not about excusing the wrong, but about freeing ourselves and allowing God to restore what was broken. What lies ahead for Joseph's family? Will reconciliation lead to lasting peace? Join us in the next chapter as we reflect on the lessons of Joseph's journey and their impact on our lives. If this chapter moved you, please like this video and share your reflections. Who do you need to forgive today? And subscribe to God's Story to uncover more lessons of grace and faith. Joseph's story reminds us that forgiveness brings freedom and healing, allowing us to move forward in God's purpose.